Weapon Peace, Episode 4, Destroyers. Destroyers are considered one of the relatively modern naval vessels, as they were first entered into the service in 1885 by the sailor Fernando Cueto under the name of gun and torpedo boats. He worked as a Spanish naval officer, born in 1845, and who was killed in 1898 in the American-Spanish War. The construction philosophy for them was to create a quickly maneuverable and capable naval vessel to stay at sea for a long time. It was produced specifically to confront and to stop the threat of torpedo boats on large and heavier ships, using its maneuverable and speed, as well as all type of cannons. In addition to the torpedo at later stage, they were initially called torpedo boat destroyers. Then little by little, their name changed to destroyers. After World War II, destroyers became larger, heavier in load, and able to operate independently from the rest of the fleet as a result of appearance of anti-aircraft missile. Before delving into the characteristics of destroyers, a question arises. How can torpedo boats threaten battleship in the depth of the sea? The answer is that the torpedo boats used to wait to battleships near to the shore because they were small in size, and then they would launch a torpedo and use their speed to evade the fire of the battleship. There are three characteristics that distinguish the destroyers in order to carry out this mission. First, maneuvering and speed to approach torpedo boats, especially with the transformation of the torpedo into a weapon capable of maneuvering. Second, the range to keep pack with the large ships, because its main goal is to provide protection for large ships such as battleships and cruisers. Third, light armament to confront torpedo boats or other destroyers, because torpedo boats are considered small in size. What is torpedo gunboat? It's a great father of the destroyers, and it was designed to destroy torpedo boats using cannons and torpedoes as well. The British Navy was a pioneer in this field. Fernando Cueto then asked several British companies to display their models and choose one of the British companies. The ship was named Destructor, and many consider it the first step toward the destroyer, and not everything that proceeded. It was launched in 1886, but some historians believe that destroyers began in 1892. When Admiral John Fisher asked the industrial docks to provide a warship equipped with a water tube boiler engines, in addition to arming it with relatively a small caliber rapid fire anti-ship cannons. It's worth noting that these boats can be considered the first destroyer, and will call torpedo boats destroyers to form the real face of the destroyer. There are points that must be taken into account: that the torpedo gunboat was slower than the torpedo boat destroyer. Design change. The design change from turtle back foredeck by the raised forecast played an important role in sailing in rough weather and increasing the space inside the ship, making it distinctive in terms of shape from the destroyers before it. What about fuel? The introduction of petroleum fuel played an additional role in increasing the speed of warship, and this began with the spiked fuel ship, which in a torpedo boat destroyers (TBD) in 1904. A group of officers tried to define the role of the destroyer and justify the expenses of building it. So one of the officers in the British Navy, Admiral Baldwin, who held the rank of Vice Admiral, determined the objective of the destroyer by first recognizing the places that the rest of the Navy will cover and carrying out a pre-attack before the torpedo boats arrive at the place from which the large pieces can be targeted. Second, combing the enemy coastal area. Third, monitoring the enemy ports, especially the torpedo boats. Confrontation with submarines. During their confrontation with the submarines, destroyers were characterized by their speed and armament, capable of hitting the submarine before it's submerged. Also, the smallness of the submerged part of the destroyer makes targeting it by submarines with the torpedoes a difficult process. Some destroyers also have the advantage of having a shaft in the front of the ship, the goal of which it is to directly collide with the body of the submarine. Their capabilities were later enhanced by sensors to locate submarines with hydrophones and depth charts to target them in depth. Due to the improvement of the destroyer's capabilities combating submarines, they became during the First World War, combining commercial shipping to protect them from submarines, which added another burden to them in addition to the task assigned to them. The importance of confronting the submarines on the design of destroyers and the creation of new classes of ships. Submarines attacks on cargo ships had an impact on the destroyers. New destroyers were designed called escort destroyers, and the new classes of the ship were also produced called frigate and corvettes ships, because they were cheaper and easier to produce than the destroyers, and their small size remained them of the destroyers in their early era, where they were called torpedo boats destroyers. The bottom line is what? In the beginning, destroyers were designed primarily as a ship to track and destroy torpedo boats, and were smaller than battleships and cruisers. Then gradually they began to transform into a multi-mission ships, getting rid of their limit range and even becoming one of the largest naval vessels in the fleet, which made it difficult to determine their specification from the rest of the fleet vessel.